Hello, welcome to Working Dragon Mystic, where we discuss real metaphysical and occult content so you can manifest real and tangible results in your life. And we are live tonight in our community with our topic tonight, which is time frames in spell working. This is actually a topic that was recommended or requested by one of our community members, and they had several bullet point questions underneath this particular question. And it's one I put on the list, and I've been wanting to get to it, so I'm really excited about this tonight. If you are interested in our community and you're watching this on Rumble or YouTube, there'll be a link below to the community. It is free to join the general community, but if you want access to the online school and the supporter-only chats, that is for supporters, obviously, and that's only, I want to say, $10 a month, and you get a lot of perks. Monthly spell workings, there's supporter live chat where you get to just chat with me, ask me any question once a week easily. You get easy access to me. The supporter chat, I'm always up in there. We do giveaways. The supporters are the ones that are automatically entered in the giveaways. Anytime we do live workshops, supporters automatically get access to those live workshops. And they also get access to all my courses in the online school. Pretty cool. That's only if you're interested in supporting us. You don't have to. That being said, let's get into this, folks, shall we? All right. For those in the chat here, do feel free to ask questions as we go along. Time frames in spellworking. This has been a contention ever since I started studying magic, right? I have heard every which way about this. And the general advice that I was given all those many years ago was you shouldn't put a time frame on it, because then you're putting a limitation on the magic. The more limitations you put on the magic, the less likely the magic is going to do or manifest, because magic takes the path of least resistance, and you gotta give it the time to find that and all that. And that, I understood that. And for those who know my personal story, you also know I came from a religious background. I struggled with ideals of faith and those kinds of things, and I eventually found my way into Wicca. And Wicca, to me, was just another flavor of religion that really didn't fit what I was looking for. And when I left it, I also decided I was going to disprove magic. And I started shooting for data as opposed to anything else. And to be honest with you, that required strict parameters around it, okay? Interestingly enough, what I found is with parameters actually outlining my spell working, I actually started to get measurable results, actually genuinely measurable results, right? And that's what kept me going, kept me doing magic. Like, I had a whole year-long plan to disprove magic did absolute shit. Problem was, at the end of the year, the data proved me wrong instead of me, and that's really how I got to where I'm at, because I just kept pushing that envelope, kept wanting to learn more, because I finally found something that was genuinely working, genuinely producing those results, right? And it shows in my approach to magic today is more on that data scientific method ish side of the fence, right? But everyone's like, well, time frames, how do you handle time frames? I'll be honest. First and foremost, I do think a time frame is actually important. I really do. And you can disagree with me. Everybody's free to disagree with me. I don't care. But the reason I think it's important is because, if you're actually trying to collect data, you need to know how long the spell's supposed to run for, right? How long should you allow a spell to do its thing before you do another spell? Or if you're doing a series of spells, like, for example, the prosperity spell on our YouTube channel, that is a spell that you do daily or weekly, and you constantly put more energy to it over the long term, right? So you still need to know, how often you're doing that spell, and you generally want to know what the end result is, right? I do. I know I do. So I usually run my prosperity spells by the month. And then again, right now in the community, we're running a prosperity project with X Boonwell that everybody's having so much fun with, where we're actually getting into the crunchy bits of prosperity magic and actually how to measure it short term and long term, to actually see those manifestations. And we're breaking it into weeks, we're breaking it into months, we're breaking it into quarters, those kinds of things. So we do have those time frames. And a lot of people will say on those that those time frames, those are naturally occurring time frames. Like, I do the spell once every new moon. You could absolutely do that. And here's the thing. When I do the spell, I always look at what I'm doing. What is my goal, right? There are times and places where if I am trying to grow my bank account, for example, back when I first started Magick, and my disproving magic project was absolutely based on prosperity, because it's easy to measure a bank account, quite frankly. But I knew that I needed to take regular data points. So I was doing those spells, and I was giving those spells each a week to work. And I was doing, well, I had a few different spells running, but one of them, I would do it once a week. It had 1 week to run. Every week before I did the spell again, I was taking a data point. And then I'd do the spell again. I had other spells that I was running daily during meditations. Then I had some that I was doing monthly. And I was taking those data points. I was keeping them in my journal separately, right? But they're for a long-term goal. So I am getting those data points, but I do also have a long-term goal, right? And the long-term goal, I'm not trying to reach overnight. If you don't give the spell enough time, there is a problem. There is. And this really, to me, comes a little bit from trial and error and experiment. And, you got to sit down and think what, first off, feels actually tangible, right? What feels tangible? We all know doubt, first and foremost, can be one of the biggest killers of your magic, because if you doubt your own power, odds are it'll never manifest to start with. It's kind of problematic in the way that it functions, but it is what it is. So if you want to increase your bank account by, let's say, $300, and you absolutely positively in your brain can conjure no way that that's going to happen inside a month would be a time period I would not recommend you doing that spell work for. Whether it's long-term spell work or not, that month is just going to be grounded out by your own doubt. But if you think that could be something you could accomplish in 3 or 4 months, and that feels probable to you, that's probably a good place to go. My general rule of thumb is find where it feels doable. And so I usually find an amount and a time frame that I find doable, right? So if 300 in 3 months sounds doable, I actually do 3 months and shoot for 500. And it's the old gambler in me shooting the moon, try and get as much as you can and see if you fall short a little bit. But if I'm shooting for 500 and I fall a little short, odds are I'm going to get very close to my 300, right? And again, by tracking the data, you can actually see the increase over that 3-month period anyway. But by setting that hard line that the spell has this time to function, all the ether, all the energy you collect for that spell, it is going to hit that problem. It's going to hit it hard, it's going to hit it fast, and it's going to work to manifest as much as it can in that time frame. Does that mean that it will manifest exactly what you asked for in that time frame? No. But if you're keeping good records, if you're tracking that data, you can actually see where it pushed. You can actually see that growth. You can actually see that change in your life, whether it's prosperity magic, whether it's health, whatever it may be. You can actually take stock of that, right? And then at the end of that 3 months, you take that progress, you look at it, you reevaluate it, and you go further, right? So after the end of that 3 months, let's say I'm only up 100. I'm up 100 from where I was. That's improvement. That's growth. I would do the same spell working again. I would absolutely do the same spell working again. And the thing is, since you have that first data point using that same time limit, for a fact you got progress last time. You're already starting to eliminate doubt. You're starting to build confidence in yourself. And your subconscious and conscious mind having that confidence in your working is going to empower that working further. This is the first reason I do find time frames in your spell working so important because of that. You're already starting to allow your magic to hit harder. Secondly, and this is kind of important for me, this may not apply to everyone, but for individuals whose brains are wired like me, this will definitely apply. It takes the wishy-washiness out. All right. There was once a George Carlin skit talking about religion. We all know George Carlin was an atheist, great comedian, but an atheist. And he didn't believe in religion. He didn't believe in the divinity and all that. And he said he saw no difference in praying and praying to the sun, because you pray to God 50-50, you may or may not get an answer. Pray to the sun 50-50, may get an answer. He basically said it was all happenstance, all coincidence, right? That's all he's chalking it up to. Without a time frame, without a structure, you have no way to get into that area till get past, was it coincidence? Was it just happenstance? Did I just stumble and get lucky? You don't really have a way to measure your actual personal project as a mage or progression as a mage. And those are very valid things. Now, from the religious side, okay? Because, we know I'm not, but plenty of people are. And that's cool. I'm okay with that. From the religious side, does that matter? I would say no, because from a religious side, the side of faith, some people's just really comfortable and happy with that religion. That's that thing that they get the most out of, and that is freaking awesome. It's not something I personally can do in my personal life, but I have no issues against it. I actually see great beauty in it. So that is another area where the time frame comes. But secondly, it allows you, no, that was second. So this would be thirdly. It also allows us to actually take that data and know when to schedule it. Like we did an entire workshop on magical life planning and planning out your spell working for maximum success. If you have a time frame, then you can literally take that time frame and put it in there like little Lego blocks and build out your schedule to the goals that you're wanting to manifest in your life. And honestly, I would say bonus perk by putting time frames on your magic, it actually gives you a timeline, actually shows you what's important in your life, and actually shows you what you're wanting to put your effort toward, right? Because I'll say it again, as I always say, magic is not a genie's bottle. You don't get to rub the lamp, make a wish, and everything's right in the world. If anything, magic will complicate your life more because the multiverse will expect more out of you. So if you want an easy life, I would say probably don't practice magic unless you're willing to do the work, because yes, you get the tools. The tools allow you to overcome things easier. So in some ways it does get easier, but you have to be willing to apply the tools, right? So yeah, those are definitely areas and reasons I would say put those in there. Let's see. Is there a method to accurately collect data, and how do you see that change? Absolutely. So there is actually. In fact, in the Well project, since you're in the community, I'd go check that out. We actually go over how to collect some of those data points and what data points to collect. But you do have to look at the actual spell working you're doing. And some spell workings are definitely going to be vaguer than others. Others are going to be more specific. Prosperity magic can be very specific. For example, in the Well project, we actually collect 6 months worth of financial data backwards from when the project starts. And we start implementing different exercises and different practices. And we run that out month by month. And each month we're crunching very specific data points. And the ideal is to run that 6 months out. So you have 6 months prior, you have 6 months after the project starts, which will give you an entire 12-month period of data points to compare and contrast. And you can actually see very clearly that trend line of where the magical practice has actually improved that financial standing along that entire way. We teach how to get the hard percentages and how to take up the average of the entire project, all those things. In the case of one project I'm doing right now, I did 6 months working on health related issues, weights being one of them. We'll use that one just because that's the easier one. And, about my progress for 6 months there. I've also now started incorporating very specific magical practices into that same project. And I can easily see the increased percentages of weight loss. And I can also see the increased percentages in strength gains. So those are numbers that I am able to track. It's about finding a way for you to track it. Now, in certain vague areas, you may have to use the 1 to 10 scale, like they do, like when you go to a doctor, the doctor will say on a scale of 1 to 10, what's the pain? They do this because a 5 for me might be a 25 for someone else, right? I've I've got a pretty high pain tolerance. So they have to take data points every time you go in there on your personal 1 to 10 scale. So you may have to do some projects long term, and you may have to put those on the 1 to 10 scale. I personally try to avoid the 1 to 10 scale whenever possible because, it is sort of quasi dealing with personal purview or viewpoint and feelings. And we all know how I hate dealing with feelings. But I do think the 1 to 10 scale is absolutely doable. It just takes more data points and it takes consistency and honesty. But it is definitely doable. And we'll probably run a data collecting workshop in the near future also. So yeah, those are definitely doable. And that's one of the reasons I do think timeframes are handy, right? Now, obviously, if let's say you're going to the casino this weekend, you don't want to do a spell and give it a month's time frame because that's ridiculous, right? So usually if I'm going to a casino, either Thursday or Friday before I go, I would do a little bit of magic, either A, to boost my luck, or I would create the charm that I need for the weekend, get it charged up and ready to go. And I would put it in my pocket and it'd go with me. Or I'd be doing instant on the spot quick magic, which is also a thing, people. It's also a thing. There is instantaneous magic out there. It's actually fun to play with. So you could also use stuff like that. These time frames do help and do matter. So you wouldn't need like 1 month for, like a gambling spell to go to a casino and do whatever you're doing. Always gamble responsibly, people. Don't be an idiot. Then, of course, I know somebody eventually who's watching this is going to ask about lottery. I don't recommend magic for the lottery. It is probably the worst use of prosperity magic. I won't say it's impossible, but you have to understand that your magic is going to be contested against every other person using magic, knowingly or unknowingly, who bought a ticket. And with the sheer volume of tickets, that makes your effort just dwindle to practically nothing. It's going to be less than a 1% increase that you're going to get out of it statistically. Not really the best use of your time or effort, in my personal opinion, but it is my personal opinion. So yeah, if you're asking about the lottery, that's just pretty straightforward. I know somebody was going to ask, so. But by putting these in there, it gives you specific start and stops, which you can track, easier to track. And it lets you know when you need to refresh a spell. That is a question I get emailed to me often. How often should I do a spell? Well, what was the time frame? I don't know. I didn't put a time frame on it. There's your problem right there. We don't know. At that point, I'd say just redo it and make sure you have a time frame on it, right? And look at what your schedule is. When it's like, what is the time frame, right? How short or long should I be? Well, first off, what's the project? Is it a long-term project? Is it something you're working on all year? I would actually, if it's a year-long one, I usually break it into quarters, and I do it 4 times a year. And I will, like I mentioned in the magical planning, I'll even stack weekly rituals. I'll use multiple spells to work toward the same goal and just stack them in different time frames. So by having that time frame, you can actually plan that out, right? But let's say you're in a pickle, you got to pay some bills inside the next week or two. Well, I would make sure you're doing it to manifest that money as fast as possible in the next 2 weeks. That would be the time frame. Now the problem is here, and this, I never ever recommend doing magic when stressed, because when you're stressed, when you're worried, it's harder to let go of the energy. It's harder to do the spell working and forget about it because it's going to be constantly pressing on your mind. So when you're under distress or something like that, when you're in the crunch, it is actually harder to get it to manifest. But if I was in a crunch period anyhow, I'd still do the spell working just because, hey, any help helps, right? I don't like doing, so you have to consider those factors. That's why I like to plan ahead whenever possible. That way I don't have to worry about crunch periods. But all those things can help. They can. And that's not to say, I want to make this clear too. I'm not saying those who say don't put a time frame are wrong, right? For some people, it works very well. And there's the argument to be made by a colleague of mine that for those who just kind of, they're never in a hurry in life, it'll happen if it happens kind of mindset, that honestly, the time frame on the spell might not work as well. And I know at least one colleague who practices magic and has that mindset. Okay. I don't have a lot of colleagues who practice magic with that mindset, but I have one. And it does seem to flow well for him. But he has admitted he does use time frame spells in certain aspects of his life, usually to deal with his garden, because he loves that garden. He really does. So, they can help. And I think most people would do better by having some form of a time frame on it. The one exception I would say where most people, you might not need a time frame. If you're just doing a sheer growth style working, right? If you're just trying to grow your prosperity, if you're trying to do, I don't know, maybe you're trying to get into powerlifting and you're trying to build physical strength or something like that. Or you're trying to learn a new skill and you're wanting to develop that skill faster, right? That may not necessarily, like if you're just doing this in the long term, you're building this habit, you may not need might not need a time frame per se. You might have a goal that you want to hit, and you might instead do a small, quick, and easy 5 or 10 minute spell daily as part of your daily routine, as opposed to a time frame. And it can be argued that spell would last a week if you do it, and so they're stacked. And some people would say it only lasts a day, but as being part of that routine, those little things add up very quickly. And I absolutely agree with a lot of my colleagues that oftentimes the small spells add up to a bigger bang than the one-time big spells. In that case, you wouldn't need a time frame because you already know you're doing it every day. And you're already putting it to work in your life, whatever you're doing in your life. Obviously, if you're getting into powerlifting, you're going to the gym, you're doing your lifting, you're following your routines, and you're just using the spell work to boost your gain, right? That's another case. So time frames, they're a bit on the, not all spells need hardcore time frames, but at that same time, having that time frame, and I'm probably sounding like a broken record at this point, but it does give you a very specific area to focus on, right? And since you have that area to focus on, it is easier to let go of, right? One of the things we teach in magic, if you can't let it go, the magic can't work. So if you do magic to help solve a problem, but you can't let go of the constant worry, if you constantly think about it, even after you've done the spell working, you didn't let it go, and it's obvious, it's 90% likely it won't go anywhere and do anything because you're hanging on to more of the energy than you ever released. But by putting that time frame on there, our brains work very good in little compartments and times, right? So if you know that you do the spell takes 2 weeks, that's it. For 2 weeks, you ain't got to think about it. And then in 2 weeks, you think about it. That does help a little bit with the release aspect of it as well. Assuming you did put enough juice into the spell and push enough of the worry into the spell and those kinds of things to get it out there, right? Those are all key factors that you're going to want into. And when it comes to worry and doubt and spell work, we may do a video about that in the future, okay? So if you are watching on YouTube or Rumble and you have any questions, drop them below. And also feel free to join us at the community. And for those watching live, I'll be answering any further questions you'll all have in the after chat. All right. Till next time, everybody, I'm Drake. This has been Working Dragon Mystic. Take care. Bye-bye.